Well, we'll go ahead and get started here, and if we get some other folks who join us, we'll be glad to have them join us as we go along here. Welcome, everybody. Oh, we got another one. I am glad to see everybody here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm David MacDonald, and I am the chaplain at Ohio Northern University here in beautiful Ada, Ohio, about 60 miles south of Toledo, because nobody knows where Ada is. Um, but I'm glad to be here with you today. I'm part of the what we call COCOM, the coordinating committee for UMCMA, the United Methodist Collegiate Ministry Association, and we have been we've put this whole thing together so that we can uh, still have some opportunity for conversation and connection and learning over the summer. Normally, we would not have a summer institute in the summer of a general conference because we usually have a presence at general conference and we all kind of get together there. But you all know what happened with that. So we decided we would try to do something online here. And so today and over the next week or so, we're going to be doing these sessions. Today basically is just a conversation, an opportunity for us basically, if we were together at a conference, we would be sitting around a table having coffee and just chatting. And so this is one of those opportunities. Tonight we're going to have another session, and you're welcome to join us for that one as well, we're calling cocktail hour, which I know is a little controversial for Methodists, but you can drink whatever you want at either session. But it's basically a conversation. And the focus that we wanted to talk about was specifically chaplaincy, but we believe that there's a lot of shared um, issues between chaplaincy and campus ministries in general. And so if you're not a chaplain of a college or university, you're welcome to participate in any of these conversations we're having today as well, just because it's all going to be good. So I thought what we might do is start off by introducing ourselves. And so I'm going to go around the screen as I have it on my screen. Yours may be different, but I'll go around and just ask folks, invite you to introduce yourself. Just tell us who you are, where you're from, and where you're serving. Okay. So I have Audra as the first person on my list.
Hi everyone, my name is Audra. I use she, her pronouns. I am the new director at Central Michigan University Wesley Foundation, and I'm also from Michigan, so I'm back home. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Audra. Welcome. Charles?
Hi, I'm Charles Neff. I'm the new executive director for Christian ministry at Ashland University in Ashland, Ohio. I am a United Methodist elder. Previously served at Oklahoma City University. So started Ashland in January, had 2 months in the office, and now 4 months at home. So it's been an interesting transition.
Oh, me, you muted, David. My name is Megan Otto. I am the campus minister at University United Methodist Church in Austin, Texas. I'm not a chaplain. I'm sneaking into the chaplains group because I feel like there's all good information from all you people. So I'm happy to be here. I'm also the co-chair of UMCMA, so helping to put this on, and we are always interested in hearing your feedback and anything we can do to help. So glad to see you all.
Thanks, Megan. Eric?
Hi, I'm Eric Doolittle. I use he, him pronouns. I am the college chaplain at North Central College, which is about 30 miles west of Naperville. Yes, Lauren, that you get your shout out. We'll get that. And I'm glad to be here. One thing that I think is really fun is my church conference, the last place I served in the local church is actually Harrogate United Methodist Church, which is where Judy's at. So I'm really excited to see folks and the ways we all connect here.
Awesome. And Judy, you're next.
Hey, I'm Judy Keller. I am the pastor of Harrogate, Arthur, and Mountain View United Methodist Churches in Tennessee. And I just kind of have at this point an unofficial campus ministry. We had a Wesley association years ago here, and somehow it just fell apart. So this year we have a medical school, and I've started ministry with the medical school students. And even though we're small, they're dedicated. They come to service. I'm excited about it and wanting to learn.
All right, thank you. Welcome. Lauren?
Hello, I'm Lauren Reingans. I'm the campus minister for the Wesley Foundation at University of Minnesota Twin Cities, also a North Central alum, so excited about that. And I am also not a chaplain, but I read the invite wrong. But I am really interested in hearing this conversation too, because University of Minnesota has no chaplain, no Department of Religious Life, nothing in the higher education umbrella that even acknowledges religious life whatsoever. So we're kind of in this interesting, we have 100 religious groups. There's no real umbrella organization other than kind of this scrappy interfaith coalition we try to do. So yeah, it's always a really interesting thing to think about, you know, kind of on the outside of this like massive campus, but so yeah, still trying to care for our campus. So, and I just got, well, I'm in this weird limbo. Was going to be ordained as a full deacon like 2 months ago, but maybe next June, but I'm a full member, but nobody knows what to do with me, so.
Someday we're going to have like a huge celebration for all the people who had ordinations and commissionings and everything this year. So, thanks, Lauren. Betsy.
Hi, I'm Betsy Ellifritz Warren. I am the director and campus minister of the Wesley Foundation at Eastern Illinois University, and I am officially no longer a member of the Holston Annual Conference. I know, Eric is surprised, except that Illinois Great Rivers hasn't met yet, so they haven't officially voted me in. So apparently I have no annual conference for another month.
Live it up, live it up.
Except I think that means I still answer to 30 million different people anyway, so what difference does it make?
All right, thanks, Betsy. Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz Martin. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the campus ministry assistant at the Wesley Foundation at the University of Illinois. I also serve the conjoined Wesley United Methodist Church here as Christian Education Director and praise team leader as well. So I wear a lot of hats at our church, and I work with Reverend Julie Dowler. And I started in January as well. So I hear got started for 2 months and then working from home the rest of the time. I've become a Zoom expert.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's good to have you all here. I'm actually thrilled that we have a mixture of campus ministers and chaplains. I think, again, like I said, I'm always enriched by the conversations that we have because I think we have more in common when it comes to working with our students. Structurally, obviously we have some differences, but working with students is working with students. I also want to point out that I think it's awesome that there's 9 of us, so we have perfect Brady Bunch configuration on the Zoom call this morning. So thank you for that. So nobody leave the call. Yeah, there you go, Eric. You got to look around. And Judy right now is playing the part of Alice in the middle square. So for me, I don't know who else is in your middle square, but okay. So I want to open the conversation just by asking, are there any thoughts, concerns, questions that you have as we're preparing to re-enter the school year? I know that there's a lot of things on our minds as far as like COVID-19, all of the unrest that has happened over the summer over racial violence, police violence, protests, and how all of those things, plus everything else that goes along with having a whole bunch of young people together on a campus. So if there's anything that somebody wants to lift up and just say, hey, I'd like to talk about this, now is your opportunity to do so.
One of the things that, oh, go ahead. one of the things that I've been talking a lot about with people is kind of how are we going to be educating our students to be anti-racist as the semester goes on. You know, I have lots of great ideas in person where I want to sit in a circle with people and talk to them about it. Yes, lots of good books. So I just am curious if you have started to think about ways that you're going to do that. You know, I have a whole bunch of books on my list. I have several podcasts and kind of web series that I've used, but anything interesting that you have decided to do? The University of Texas has announced they're going to have some kind of diversity focus or something. I don't really know what that means. I don't think they know what that means, but so I'm just curious as to kind of things that you're thinking about doing for this fall to talk about that more.
So we started, actually I'm leading a conversation on that book on Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist for our student center right now. We meet weekly Wednesday nights for about an hour and a half, and we're taking 2 chapters at a time. So we'll be through the book by the time the school year starts. And we're thinking, so we've called it our anti-racist book club, which I want to be really careful with framing it that way, because self-proclaimed ally is a dangerous territory to navigate. But I think just having that space open and being ready to move on to another book, the students who have joined us, we've had people come back in, someone from Ecuador. And the nice thing about having it online is that, you know, anybody can, I don't mean anybody, but like anybody, you know what I mean? So yeah, I definitely think that has been productive so far. The conversations have been excellent. I have some materials that I can share, a study guide and an invitation to brave space that I did not create, but has been really good for facilitating those conversations. What I didn't add in my introduction is that I spent 13 years in public education here in Champaign. So I have some background in social justice work through our school system and through our local social justice educators coalition as well. So,
Liz, if you wanna email me any links or any material that you have, we'll make sure that that's included in what we send out to folks when this event is over. So,
I can do that.
Our annual conference staff person just this week led the Conference Board of Higher Ed in an exercise that came from things that are published on, I think it's on the UMW website, but I know also the General Commission on Religion and Race has some resources on their website, and I'm thinking of using some of those because I have a fairly small group. So those sorts of resources work well for our group.
We're going to be using a curriculum that's produced by Spark House, which I don't know if a few of you have used them before, but we haven't tried it yet. I just bought it and it seems promising. It's called Dialogues on Race, and it has like a little video clip. So I'm hoping that will be easier to do on Zoom. The university is coming back in person, sort of, but student groups are probably not a lot. There's very narrow parameters in which we can meet in person, and we have to get all kinds of approval. So we're kind of just preparing to be digital. So I'm hoping that the like short video format that I can just like flip my screen might be sort of helpful. So yeah, this is particularly, it's been an intense summer for us here in Minneapolis, and trying to, you know, a lot of just high anxiety from our students. And so there was kind of like 2 reactions, some who are just like terrified to go outside, and then some who are like, I'm going to go stand in front of rubber bullets. So that did a little bit to my anxiety for my kids. Everyone's fine, but yeah, it's been an intense time. So hopefully, I mean, we don't have a choice. Like we're going to be talking about it. We just have to.
If you haven't already thought about attending it next Thursday, the session that we're having led by April Casperson, who's from the West Ohio Conference, it's called Decentralizing Self. She is the director of racial ethnic ministries and social justice ministries at the conference. And the conversations I had with her about the concept that she calls decentralizing self is the idea of talking about race from being a personal thing about me. Like there's a lot of folks who will say, well, I'm not racist. And so what she tries to do is to take it away from that personalization, decentralize the self, and make it more about the systemic issues. So if anybody hasn't signed up for that one, you can still sign up for it on the registration page, and we'll send you the information for it. Or if you can't make it because of schedule, we'll have the recording of that session up as well afterwards. So.
That sounds like something that I need to, I think I had signed up for it, but my church right now, and I have to kind of go lightly here or for any other way to saying it, because there were some emails that the Holston Conference sent out that my parishioners personalized. And it has caused the biggest controversy in my church. I've lost two of my most, the people that helped me the most, I've lost them over it. And, you know, that's going to be extremely helpful for me, I think.
Yeah, I found April's work to be really helpful because she talks about how you can be not racist, but still participate in a systemic, you know, a cultural system or society that is racist. So, yeah. Any other resources, thoughts that other people are using? Yeah, Eric?
I'm thinking about some things. We've been kind of on the front edge of this for a couple of years because of some incidents on our campus. North Central is a predominantly white institution. And so there's been some real digging in over the past 2 or 3 years after some incidents on campus. So thinking institutionally, there's some things that we've been doing, and hopefully some connections that some of you who are serving Wesley Foundations may be able to think about. It was reaching out to the whatever Multicultural Affairs, Black Student Association, whatever organizations there are on your local campus to see what resources they're doing and kind of dovetail with that. That's been really beneficial to us. Pardon me for a second. But we brought in last year a group called Essential Partners, who does training on difficult discussions, and especially one on diversity issues. And that was something we did with our whole Student Affairs division. And we found that very beneficial. There's also a book that's out called Race Talk, which is also about how you lead those kinds of discussions. And so we went through that with as a book club, as staff. And then we're also working with some faculty folks who are doing some movie talks, and they've invited us to be part of that conversation with them. And so it's really looking for those places where you have some built-in institutional partners who you might be able to touch base with. I'm very fortunate in that the chaplains department at North Central College has been very on the forefront of that. And I think it's a great opportunity for those of us who are serving either Wesley institutions or as chaplains to remind ourselves, like, this is part of why we're on campus, is that we can speak up because we know where we're coming from. We have those roots and say, this is part of who we are. And hopefully you're finding that from your conference, from the church, from UCM&A, that you have those resources available. So just a couple of bigger things as you're looking at, working with your people, if you've got staff and things like that.
There are also some really great movies, documentaries that have been made available via multiple platforms. A bunch of them have been made available for free. We started our video edition series this summer on Just Mercy, which was really good. We've also done The Hate You Give and the documentary 13th, which is on Netflix. So lots of those resources available.
I'm actually, one of the neat things that the college has done is we've put together a resource through the library of those kinds of materials that are out there. And one of the things they've asked me to do is specifically go back through and see if I can compile one on faith-based resources on fighting racism. Obviously, like, the entirety of the catalog of Dr. King is on that list, but More modern stuff has actually been a kind of a challenge in some ways. And so if you have those, I would love to see those resources. And I think that most of us would. One that I recommend is Austin Channing Brown's book, I'm Still Here, which is a great intersection of faith and race. And there's a few more of those out there.
Yeah, she was one of our speakers last year in Denver, and I know a lot of us really, were inspired by the challenge that she gave. One of which was that white people need to spend more time talking about race with other white people and stop relying on Black people to educate us. So yeah, that's definitely a great resource. I also wonder too, Eric, if anything coming out of the Poor People's Campaign, the new Poor People's Campaign, with the Reverend Dr. Barber and those kind of folks, they might have some good resources as well.
Yeah, Austin was going to be coming this spring to speak on campus.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else that's on your mind? Or yeah, Audra?
I have one more thing about that. I'm curious how others have thought about contextualizing this conversation. In particular, thinking about, yes, decentralizing self, but thinking about how systems of racism manifest in our communities and on our particular campuses. And I know that at Central Michigan University, we have a very evident history of settler colonialism because we have a reservation that is part of our city. So I'm just curious how others have thought about bringing that into the conversation.
We had a student group last year, the Student African American Brotherhood, who put together a conversation. It was almost entirely student led, but they contacted our local police and they contacted our the sheriff of our county and some other folks who were involved in law enforcement and the justice system, and just had an evening's conversation. It was probably one of the most rich and well-attended programs that our campus has had in a long time on anything, but particularly around race. And it was a really good conversation. It actually jump-started a whole movement on our campus of students talking about, what does it mean for us to be a campus located in the kind of place that we're in? Because again, we're very rural, very conservative politically community. And so, yeah, I don't know how you could reproduce that because it was so student led, but I would say if there are students who are wanting to have those conversations, to start there and see if you could sort of motivate and empower and equip them to go out and start those conversations.
Yeah, I would say sort of wherever you are, one of the topics that I know my students are definitely thinking about is policing. And I mean, that's very specific in Minneapolis because of the campaign to defund and refund what policing looks like. And our university actually, University of Minnesota has announced that they are no longer going to partner with the Minneapolis Police Department for large events. They're just not for like football games, traffic control. They've just severed that relationship. So that is something that, students are going to be thinking about pretty strongly. And there's, if you have a campus police department, thinking about what that looks like. And I know some campuses that, is a lot less intense. Ours, I believe our officers are armed or have been in the past. I'm not quite sure, but it's that's something that, is really specific that every town, every context has. And, looking at just about every police department has had to face this and, kind of confronting that from the local angle, I think would be important.
One of the things I did when I first came to Ada 8 years ago was I actually made an appointment and sat down with the police chief, which shocked him because he said it was the first time anybody from the university, other than in like an official capacity, had actually come to visit him. But I was just used to doing it from having been a pastor before. Like that's just what you do, is you go meet the local leaders. So that conversation, I think, led to some really good relationship building that we've been able to lean on when there have been issues like students who've been arrested or detained or things like that. to be able to have that personal connection, to say, hey, let's have a conversation here. What's going on here? What's really happening? And by the way, have you noticed that a large majority of the people who you're arresting from our campus happen to look a specific way? Which is something I think you can only say if you've built the relationship, or at least have it. I mean, you can say it, but for it to be heard, I think it's really important to have that relationship, because then they know you're coming from a good place.
One thing that I think that I need to address somehow, and I don't quite know how to do it or what resource, is there is in the community as a whole, there's some racism there. For example, when I went out to lunch with my district superintendent, who is African American, and we went to a restaurant, and even though there was only 4 or 5 tables in the place that were occupied, we waited and we waited and we waited, and we weren't served, and we waited and we were ignored. And I finally just popped up and said, you know, nobody's helped us. And it really made me realize, like when we were driving back to the church, she said to me, I don't think this would be a place where I would feel safe at night. And that really opened my eyes. And I don't know how to even get a conversation started about that, but there needs to be one. So if anybody has any idea resources, I sure would appreciate it.
The book White Fragility is a really good place to start for white people who are new at doing any kind of anti-racism work. It helps give some insight into the kind of the psychology behind how white people tend to react to conversations about racism, and why it feels awkward, and why there can be some defensiveness and feelings of being attacked. And if you kind of have a little more knowledge about that as you go into conversations with other white folks, it really helps you think about what to say and how to say it. And it might even be a good thing to encourage, like that could be a good book club place to start, perhaps for your church, to have other, you know, it's a white author, which I also, she is an expert, but I also caution against leaning too much on white authors' opinions about racism. But I do think that Robin DiAngelo, her book is a good place to start. And there's a video on the United Methodist website as well of her. It's about 20 minutes long, I think. Yeah, thanks, Betsy. Which is a really good introduction.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Good. I was wanting to add just some observations from my recent past. When I was at Vanderbilt University, we had issues with our police. Vanderbilt Police Department is like the 5th largest police department in the state of Tennessee. We had some of these same issues for decades of students of color in particular being profiled, being not always arrested, sometimes very seldom arrested, but usually at least questioned in ways that other students weren't. And we addressed that over time, and some things that really helped to set not only a better tone, but a better relationship both ways was when our police chief certainly made sure that we had more racial and ethnic balance in our police force, and also that they were deployed more on bikes and just walking, and because we have a residential campus. And so once there was a kind of a more organic presence rather than just police cruisers all over the place, that really helped a lot. It's not that the problem went away entirely, but that really helped a lot. So, you know, I know your campuses are all different in that regard in terms of what your balance of residential to commuter and all that is. But we found that when our police officers were on bikes and walking around and interacting a little bit more shoulder to shoulder, of course, these days with COVID, that's kind of hard, but still, that's at least one thing to keep in mind when you have these conversations.
Any other thoughts or topics of conversation? Mark, welcome, by the way, and Chad as well. Why don't you two go ahead real quick and introduce yourselves, because we went around and did that earlier. But Mark, why don't we'll start with you, and then Chad, you can introduce yourself.
Oh, great. Thank you. I'm Mark Forrester. I am at the General Board of Higher Education Ministry. I've been there for about 1.5 years. As I was just mentioning, though, I've been in higher ed ministry for 27 years before coming to Vanderbilt. So spent 24 years at Vanderbilt University, and then prior to that, I was at Austin Peay State University, which is a Tennessee State Board of Regents school. So that's where I come from, and that's where I am.
Thanks, Mark. Chad? You're still muted, Chad.
You'd think we'd get used to that by now. My name is Chad Johns. I'm the university chaplain at Ohio Wesleyan University, just north of Columbus in Ohio. This will be my 16th year on campus, 14 as an associate chaplain, last year as an interim chaplain, and now starting this year as the senior chaplain. Yay. And my apologies for being late. We actually had a campus-wide meeting that ran over about how we're going to completely reopen with COVID and what that looks like and all those policies. I was just make a comment, mentioned the book White Fragility. I would urge caution around that one. Just yesterday, I read a pretty scathing critique of it from a Black professor at Columbia, who actually made what I thought was a pretty strident argument that the book itself is just teaching white people to be racist in a new way. And it challenged some things, I think. And I think there's a lot out there that's just hard right now. We're actually using the Kendi book with all our incoming first-year students this year. So I think that has received a pretty positive reception among the faculty and staff that are reading it so far. But I know nothing's perfect, right? Like there's always going to be challenges with any resource. In my experience, White Fragility has been more controversial than a lot of the other resources that are out there.
One other resource I would recommend is So You Want to Talk About Race by, I've got to get the author here. I read it quite a while. Ijeoma Oluo. I actually listened to the audiobook, which was read by the author, and she has some really challenging, like she lays it on the line. She doesn't pull any punches. She's an African American woman specifically speaking to white people and saying, look, if you really want to talk about race, here's what you need to be talking about. So I found it really helpful, and also had to at times put it down so that I could kind of meditate and think about it, because it really challenged me. So for me, that's a reason to recommend it.
One of the other things that I've used is The Next Question, which is the conversation between Austin Channing Brown and Chi-Chi and the other girl, I can't remember her name. But anyway, it's a series that they did where they talked to various people about issues of race, and it is excellent resource. Really good conversation. I think it's the second or third episode. They interview, I should probably get all this information to you before I start talking about it, but they interview this guy, I'm looking for the name of it, but it is such an interesting, Andre, that's his name, Andre Hendry. Power to the People is the name of the episode, but they talk about statues, they talk about culture, they talk about so many different things, and I just found it to be such an interesting kind of topic to begin to talk with people about some of the things that we are comfortable with but don't understand the history of, or the impact of. So anyway, it's another resource that I think, you know, sometimes having a shorter video series and then being able to talk about it, I think is beneficial for college students to have kind of different mediums to do that with, but I've used it and have really enjoyed it, so.
There's also, I put it in the chat, it's called Me and White Supremacy, and it was initially like an Instagram series that the author did of basically she gives a definition of a term like white fragility and white supremacy, and then she asks some questions, and it's basically to say, here, white people, you think through your stuff. And so it's a pretty easy read, but I've only gotten through like the second chapter of it because just thinking through and trying to figure out, like, I don't actually know the places where my white privilege has been harmful to Black people, like in the jobs that I've had or the job searches that I've been a part of. So I find myself just thinking about some of those questions on a pretty regular basis. And my tendency is to want to ask the Black people that were involved in those situations, but I'm like, you know, I'm gonna not do that because that's part of the problem is making them do the work for me. So I would recommend that as well. I'm in a group of women that's supposed to start discussing that tonight, but sometimes I forget to do the Zoom meetings that are not required. So I might miss that, but I should write it down and go see what people have to say.
Yeah, I just sent the link to the article that Chad was mentioning. I read that also earlier this week by John McWhorter. His critique of Robin DiAngelo's white fragility. He's an African-American professor at Columbia University in linguistics. And it is a very scathing review. So I take it seriously, some of the things that he is saying, because more or less says that I need to read the entire book. I've read pieces of it myself and find it very, very instructive and enlightening on many levels. But he's right in saying that the Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech is completely deconstructed in a way that is so totally unhelpful. And that when King says that someday we will judge each other not by race but by content of our character, she says, in essence, folks, that's never going to happen. Give it up. And we just need to make sure that we know that every day, we're going to struggle with this, which is true in a practical sense. But his point was that when you take away the aspirational goal of what King had to say, then you're really in a very hopeless situation. And so and it's interesting, he is himself an atheist. I've listened to some of his podcasts, but he calls this very bad religion. So I would be interested to see what others are thinking about that as kind of we read through this literature, because I find that on one level it's very instructive in terms of underscoring the real problems that we have to engage. But and he's not denying that as much as he's saying it's a question of how we engage it and what the rules of engagement are. So.
Well, and I think that the rules of engagement with an entirely white crowd are very different than if you have a racially diverse crowd that you're talking to. And I think some of the things in DiAngelo's book make a good point about everybody starts in a different place, and it's an ongoing thing, and to not put pressure on, like, if you have a question about something, there are plenty of resources out there that have already been published and made available, and you don't have to go to your Black friend and say, hey, can you tell me more about this? Because they're tired, like they're sick of that. It's too much. So definitely some good takeaways, but I do appreciate I think everything should actually be read carefully and critically and compared with other things as well. And Kendi goes into kind of the caution of thinking that there's going to be a post-racial society as well. And I also wanted to point out, if you haven't read it yet, he does go into the faith side of things too, at least with his family's faith and his personal struggles with racism and faith.
So, and I'm paralleling that with his book. If you haven't done Stamped from the Beginning, where it actually gives like the historical origins and the involvement of the church in racism in American history, it's enlightening in and of itself. Just to kind of be reminded that George Whitefield was a staunch defender of slavery because he owned a plantation. You know, and so, and how the Enlightenment works and everything like that. So if you have a chance and you're of an academic bent, the source material for all that's really amazing.
Stamped from the Beginning is currently available for free to listen to on Spotify.
Wow.
It's a long listen, but it's there and it's good, and his research is thorough. Yeah, it's huge. Yeah.
So one thing I would just toss out there, and people were talking about contextualizing earlier. I'd had some experiences before with race conversations where I felt like I was missing part of the conversation. And it took me a while to kind of piece together, you know, I'm young enough that I've never known legal segregation. Interracial marriage has always been legal. I've always been taught that there's equality between the races. And so when I'm in conversations with people a generation above me, they have life experiences that I don't have, that they're working on overcoming, that I've never known. But what I do have to work through is that I grew up in the era of colorblindness, right? And so that's its own set of assumptions. You know, and part of my journey has been figuring out how much there is that I don't know, because it was all hidden under this, we've already made it, we're already equal. And I think those are two very different contexts to come from. And I wonder, you know, what our current college students, like, what's that context for them? For both our white and our students of color. Like, what are the assumptions that we all make because we're a generation removed, at least in some cases, maybe from what they are? And what's the helpful conversation there to figure out where they're actually starting from?
I think, Chad, for me, one of the things that my students have opened my eyes to, in large part, is the idea of intersectionality, that it's not just black and white, and that there are a lot of intersectionalities that exist that students are identifying with all at the same time, whereas I think previous generations have done a disservice by sort of categorizing everything in its own separate container, but all of those things work together. And so, you know, this brings in issues of class, it brings in issues of education, it brings in issues of sexuality, and I think all of those things are things that I'm learning I have sort of compartmentalized when they ought not to be necessarily compartmentalized in these discussions.
Yeah, I just sent a link also from a really good podcast I'd highly recommend. It's on YouTube, and it's the Rolling Stones, was the Rolling Stone magazine, Matt Talib, and it's his podcast, Useful Idiots, and he's interviewing Adolph Reed, who is a faculty emeritus of Penn State in Afro-American Studies. And he talks a lot about intersectionality and brings, I think, some very granular critique to what's going on in third wave anti-racism. Very good. And he brings in a lot of the class analysis that needs to be part of the conversation, which as an African American, he says needs to be part of the conversation, but is usually ruled out. And so I think this is a very good interview. The last half of it, the first half is really good as well, but the last half with Professor Reed is really pretty remarkable.
Thanks, Mark. For those of you who are wondering, I'm going to send out all of these links and all this information later, so you don't have to worry about furiously copying them down or anything. I'll make sure that you get them all.
Oh, good. I was going to ask you. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get them. I've been typing them into my email as we've been going along, so we'll get them out to you later.
One of the other questions that I have, not the chaplain, taking over the chaplain call. Really sorry about it. Have all the questions.
Thanks, Megan.
I'm sorry. I'm here to help. I just wonder, what are you all planning to do, whether you are in person or hybrid, or, you know, what things are you planning to do with your students this year that are different or carryovers from what you did in the late part of the spring? I'm just curious about the things that you plan on doing to connect your students, whether you're in person or not. So if you could share those things, I would love to listen to them.
That's a great segue, Megan. Thanks. Any thoughts?
Well, I'll be honest, this is something I'm wrestling with right now, because our biggest program is a mission experience, which we're probably not going to be allowed to do. We don't have campus worship because we're in walking distance of 13 churches. And so that's not been something that our campus has needed. The bulk of what I do right now is pastoral care. But that's tricky when I don't know how I'm going to meet people to have that doorway open. So I, like Megan, would also be very interested if people have ideas about what works, what doesn't, because I'm definitely looking at the coming fall semester with just my head spinning, trying to figure out what on earth this looks like.
Yeah, my biggest thing that I do is I feed people, a lot of them, all the time. I do all the cooking all the time, all the shopping all the time. And so I'm just sitting here thinking, like, what in the fuck am I going to do with all of my time and with all of these children if I can't shovel food in their face? Okay, that's it.
Yeah, Megan, I am facing that too.
Yeah.
I've been like,
we have that too.
Do I tell them to bring their own supper? Like, do I give them McDonald's gift cards and tell them to go get it, bring it back, and then we all sit on the front lawn far enough? Like, I don't know. And I've also, one thing that I've been doing is sending care packages. And I'm finishing up the July ones today. And I'm like, you know what? I don't think I can keep doing that because it's using up my budget. And, you know, and it's just, I feel like it's nice for now, but eventually I'm gonna have to make decisions about the ones that graduated. I'm gonna quit sending them, you know, like, when do I cut them off? I don't really know. So yeah, the only thing that I know for sure is that I'm gonna keep trying to get them together on Zoom, but it's not the same as what it is when we're together in person, and some of them never show up. So I don't know.
I think, you know, in response to that and to what Chad was talking about, I think that's where the one-to-one connections are going to become really important. And I know that's not a model that a lot of us use frequently. I mean, all of us do one-to-one stuff from time to time, but not as our major focus. I found in the spring that was actually a big portion of my time, was just doing one-to-one Zooms with folks. And I found that people really responded to it. I actually, and I'm going to do this again in the fall, I set up on my Google Calendar appointment slots where people could go in and just book themselves. And then I got a little notification that said, hey, you've got a booking for, you know, Tuesday at 1 with so-and-so. And then I would send them the Zoom information. So yeah, I think for me, at least, your mileage may vary, but for me, I think there's going to be a lot of one-to-one mentoring and working and pastoral care. And maybe that's where, yeah, maybe it is, you know, if you know somebody who needs a lunch, you give them a gift certificate or a gift card or something. And so you don't do it for everybody, but you do it for the ones that you know as you're talking to them that they need that. Or maybe you order in a meal for you and that person and then sit socially distanced somewhere, you know,
Friends, I was counting on you and you've let me down. I'm very disappointed in all of you, just in case you're wondering.
Well,
So again, this is not
sorry.
really a, oh,
Man
go
is-
ahead.
so one thing that we have done is we were very intentional about upping our game with our media presence and using this time from spring and summer to play with some ideas of how can we continue to be in touch with people. The one-on-one, of course, has been great, but we also want to be able to get content. And one of the nice things is, you know, college students use their phones and use social media and use videos and watch those things, and it really builds rapport with them. So we've been doing that and building with the rapport we have with students already to send them 2 and 3 minute videos, to make sure we record all of our online worship services, to make all of that available to, and the college is doing that too with a lot of their resources. And so there's kind of a multiplying effect between different offices because we know it's a, you know, a tech savvy generation. So give them what they want, and they're used to engaging that way. They're still going to want more, of course. They're going to want that personal contact. But you know that I've got a 2 or 3 minute video that got passed around from some different students. They've seen my face and they've seen it on this format. And so that can really kind of help brand it to say, for now, this is normal, and you can actually have that conversation. So we're looking at how to continue to do that. So it's like we're still going to gather for in-person worship services somehow. Illinois has got some pretty strict restrictions, which has been helpful on the health front. But you know, how do we go ahead and make sure that that is live streamed and recorded so that people can engage with it later for those who are seeking a way to be part of this community. So I think it's, you know, if you haven't done a 2 minute video, even if it's just an intro video of yourself saying, here I am, this is get to know me, that's a really easy format for people to engage with right now.
Well, and I guess that reminds me of the things that I have done that for during the semester. Every morning, I ended up not doing it on Saturdays eventually, but every morning at 10, I did a morning devotion on Facebook Live. And then every night at 10, I read a bedtime story, because that was one way that I tried to encourage my students to, even though it was on Facebook Live, to be like, this is a moment to get, I don't think that any of them ever did it, but I was hoping to be like, okay, put down your phone after this and go get some rest. And I've been doing that less frequently during the summer, but I also am like, you know, I don't know when there would be a time when it would be appropriate to be like, oh, we're not having morning devotions anymore. That seems like something I maybe should have been doing all along that I just never thought about. So that is something that I'll continue at least a couple times a week. And I'm anticipating there's going to be a moment when the governor's like, hey, everybody in Illinois, go home again. I think it's going to happen this fall. And then I'll probably go back to doing the morning devotions and the bedtime stories more frequently, because that was one point of contact that students on a regular basis, like, they didn't necessarily interact a lot, but several of them did watch it and did like it. And then they said, you know, even if I don't watch it when it happens, I watch it later, and I appreciate that. So yes, that is something I have done and will keep doing. So there you go. There's one answer.
Yeah, I
So
think
the
what
thing
this
that-
is, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, this is kind of a slightly different pathway, but the thing that's keeping me up at night is less about what I'm going to do digitally and how I'm going to find students to care for. They just announced, so we're back in this hybrid thing. Dorms are going to be open, dining halls are open, some classes are in person. They're doing like Saturday classes. They're ending before Thanksgiving. They're gonna be so stressed out. It's a hot mess. But they canceled the activities fairs, which is when 6,000 freshmen get crammed in, and that's where we find most of them. And they're not even trying to replace it with a digital thing. They pretty much said, hey, student groups, remember all that funding you applied for? You're not getting that. Try again, ask for funding, and like we'll find out like 2 weeks before school starts if we're even getting funding, which they probably will. But then they're saying, well, we're replacing the activities fair with, we'll promote on our website a digital welcome event that we can send people a link to look at all the, 600 student groups and go find them yourself. And we can't have our travel is officially canceled, so we can't have our fall retreat, which is where I usually, I meet the students. 3 weeks later, we funnel them to a retreat. Everyone bonds. That sets the tone for the year. So I don't have any answers. I have no idea how I'm gonna, like, do we just give up on recruitment and focus on the students we have?
That's, Lauren, I think that's the dilemma I'm at right now, is that precipice.
Yeah, I'm kind of freaking out, I'm not gonna lie.
Am I just going to focus on what I have now and hope that some suckers trickle in as they do, or what is that balance? And I think that putting pressure on myself to find students that are not in town is stupid. That's not a good thing for me. It's not something to spend my time on or spend my energy on. So I'm leaning more toward just focusing on the ones I have and moving forward. So anyway.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I want us as UMCMA to advocate for when this is all over is a reset on metrics, so that there's not the expectation that we're going to have the numbers at the end of this that we had going in, and it just sort of saying, yes, we get it. It sucked to recruit during COVID, and so that's something I'm hoping that we can get the message across beginning at General Conference next year, and sort of start getting the buzz going with that, and then going forward, reaching out to some of our, we have connection with our conference board of higher ed leaders and staff members, and so we want to have that conversation with them as well. How can we sort of reset our expectations? Because I don't have the same issues, because I'm the campus chaplain, and so I have lots of different avenues through which I can recruit students. But I even think we're going to struggle, because I think there's going to be so much noise to break through on campus this fall, that it may just be worth our time just to really pour into the people that we have, and really, really, really focus on them. And maybe they'll surprise us and bring some people along with them too. I mean, this might be the season for empowering our student leaders to start bringing folks with them, and not just relying on the campus minister or the chaplain to attract people.
And I think one of the things that sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think that there's also an unprecedented opportunity here, though, in that students are going to be limited in the things that they're going to be able to do outside of their classes. There's not going to be the typical distractions. There probably won't be the frat parties and sorority parties and going out to the movies and going, that they're going to be looking for ways to fill their time. I think if we can lean on our student leaders, our returning students, it's them and their points of contact that potentially will draw in those new faces. That, hey, here is a group that has meant so much to me in my 2 or 3 years here at the college already. Come and be a part of this. And then it's on us to make sure that the programming is there, the opportunities are there, the ways to connect are there, and the ways that we're doing that where we are is going to be following the same hybrid model that they're doing for classes. That there's going to be opportunities to meet in person, but those in-person opportunities are also going to have a link that you can join by Zoom or join by Facebook Live or whatever. That students, if they don't feel comfortable coming in person, they can do it from their dorm room. And some may find that if they're in person, they're going to have to wear a mask. If they're in their dorm room, they don't have to wear a mask. And maybe that's enough of an incentive for them to participate from their dorm rooms. But I think that there's going to be some opportunities here if we can break, as you said, David, break through that noise and let people know that we're here, that we're alive, that we're that we're something that you want to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one thing that I've been thinking about is doing a virtual mask fashion show. So show us your best mask, and we'll give a Amazon gift card to the person who gets the most votes. Again, it's something that's kind of out there, but it's fun, and it'll draw people to at least consider what you're doing outside of that, because then you've got a whole bunch of names of people now that you can reach out to and say, hey, here's the other things we do, by the way. Yeah.
One thing, just going back to this, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say quickly, David, I really appreciated what you had to say about just spending a lot of time one-on-one with students, and just some good old-fashioned pastoral care and counseling. Certainly wellness needs are going to be extremely high, as they have been previously, but even more so now for obvious reasons. And, I'm just wondering, there are a lot of campuses, of course, if not, all, that certainly have counseling and wellness centers that are going to really be overtaxed even more than ever. And this may be a really great time to be on a referral list, you know, and so you'll be meeting a lot of new students one-on-one that might have certain specific kinds of needs of a religious or philosophical nature that you can take on. And I know, like, again, when I was at Vanderbilt, but this is happening in a lot of our Methodist schools, there's these virtual portals now for student health and mental health as well. And so it's a triage kind of platform. And so students just come into that, and then they kind of get sorted into different buckets of need, and they can come your way. So if you don't, I'm sure you know about that, but I just lift that up as I just see that that's going to be a really great resource going forward as well.
Yeah, and if you'd like to hear more about ways that mental health and spiritual health work together, on Monday evening or Monday afternoon, Sarah Bollinger and I are going to be doing a workshop on our webinar on spiritual practices and mental health. And Sarah is a practicing counselor, and I'm a practicing spiritual practitioner. So we're going to be talking about that. But yeah, I think, Mark, you're absolutely true. Again, you know, we have an advantage where I am because we're a United Methodist school, and so I'm part of the administrative structure. So I've gone to our counseling center, and actually one of our counselors was my co-leader for the Awakened Life program that we did last year. Not everybody's going to have that advantage, but the worst they can do is say no. So I would say offer that to your institutions and just let them know, hey, we're here as a possibility. We're not trying to, you know, tell people that what they believe or what they think is sinful or anything like that. We just want to have this conversation with folks and be there for them.
And just FYI, you know, we're doing online training for the Awakened Life. If you haven't done that, I'm actually doing my first solo instruction with the Great Plains Annual Conference starting on Tuesday. So, you know, I'd be glad to work with anybody on that. And it doesn't take that long to go through the curriculum. So.
Well, I think it raises a good point too, to say this might be easier for chaplains than for Wesley foundations. I'm not sure, but what are the collaborations? I think counseling services is a good one. We've been lucky; our office is right across the hall from them, so it's been pretty standard practice that, like, if I have a suicidal student in my office, that's beyond me. But I know the counselors, and I can literally walk the student across the hall and get them connected, right? Like, I'm already talking, we have an interim director of multicultural student affairs right now, and we're starting to talk about, like, what might we be able to do together. And even if it's something outside, I will just say part of my experience as a campus chaplain is a lot of times, as weird as it sounds, some of the most important stuff I do has nothing to do with religion. Because it's building those relationships, and it's just letting people get to know who I am, so that when they do want to have a conversation about something, I'm not a complete stranger. And so I would just encourage all of us not to overlook that or be afraid to engage that, particularly this year. I think there's some good colleague building that could happen.
I think it's not necessary. Well, I think it probably, that kind of collaboration is likely to be easier for chaplains, but I know on my campus, and I know also that my campus is unusual from what I've heard from some of you and other Wesley foundations in my conference. But we do have a campus ministers association that works well together, but it also makes me very aware that that I also have a niche, however you say, niche, whatever word you want to say, that when I remind counseling services that I'm here, I'm also going to remind them, when you have students who are working on sexuality issues, please don't refer them to the other campus. No, I probably won't phrase it that way, but they are much more welcome at my Wesley Foundation than they are at any other campus ministry. And I think this is probably going to be a time where this wording may not be right, but this might be the moment to exploit that niche in some ways, because there are going to be, you know, like, yes, there will be people with a lot more mental health needs. There are already lots of them anyway. But yeah, like that's a thing that I need to remind the counseling services is that all the campus ministers will be glad to work with you. But this is one area that in particular, like the Wesley Foundation has a history of being supportive of that the other ones don't. So I think a lot of our Wesley Foundations are in that situation from the directors that I've talked to. So that's a good thing to remember too.
Yeah, I think, you know, regardless of what it is that niche is, I think having that made aware on the campus is really important. Yeah. I also, I appreciate, Chad, your comment about how a lot of what you do has nothing to do with religion. A lot of the people I work with are not religious. As far as like the people that I just meet with on a daily basis, I have better conversations sometimes with our atheist students and faculty than I do with our religious students and faculty, because the atheist students and faculty aren't trying to convert me. But the other part of it is that sometimes, and I think, you know, this comes back to our conversation about the article from the Atlantic, sometimes people who are not of our faith tradition can be really good outside critics and give a good critique of what we're doing. And so it's actually helped me to become a better campus minister and chaplain by having those conversations. And they know that if they do have a student who has religious needs, that I'm an okay person to send that student to, that I'm not going to try to, you know, mold them into my own image or my church's image of what a religious person looks like.
So Megan, one of the other things, so when I'm a little bit more positive and hopeful for the year, one of the things I'm trying to remember is that we're also, the playing field is level. So for those of us that are at schools with a lot of religious group options, students are usually confused, and especially those who are like working through a new theology or they're dealing with their sexuality and they don't know where they fit. There's a lot of student groups that seem welcoming that really aren't, and they don't know that till like mid-semester. So, I mean, you know, we're kind of the scrappy underdogs when you look at, you know, Crew is spending our entire yearly budget in Welcome Week, and that's not going to do them any good this year. So students are looking for the content of the community and the relationships, because that's all they have. They, you know, the big cool band isn't going to be as big of a deal. My only concern when you're talking about, you know, the reset and metrics is that at least in my conference, there's all this praise of, wow, look at all these clergy doing exciting new frontier of ministry. Like, we're so grateful for you. And it feels like it's shifting now towards, okay, it's the new frontier, show us results. So I'm hoping there's still going to be that grace, and it's not just like, you know, okay, now we have a new frame of like church growth metrics and like figure it out, because this is all experimental right now.
And the other thing too, I think with that is a lot of churches are seeing such positive results with this technology because it's so new to so many of their folks. When you've got an older congregation and they're all excited about the new technology, you can see really fast growth with that. But when you're working with students, paradoxically, who are used to this kind of technology, they're like, it's just another Zoom call, you know. Especially
they're
when they're
over it. They're
especially when
so
they're going to
sick
have
of
for
it.
classes. Yeah. So yeah. Oh, that's a good point, Liz. Thank you. She says we can be collaborating with each other because distance is not an issue right now. So there could be ways that we could get our campus ministry groups together. That might be an exciting thing, rather than a Zoom call with just the people from your campus, maybe a Zoom call with people from a campus across the country. So we're going to send out everybody's contact information as well at the end of this event. So when all of our webinars and workshops are over, you'll get a list of all the participants, and you can continue to connect. That's one of the best things about Summer Institute and about UMCMA, I think, is that we make those connections. So I would definitely say use those. I would love to see maybe some of our United Methodist schools where we are chaplains getting together with some of our campus ministries over Zoom and talking about, you know, having our students talk about the issues that they have in common.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback on what you just that second said, David, with our training that just concluded this past Tuesday for the Awakened Life, we had 20 participants, and of that 20 participants, 7 were HBCU chaplains and campus ministers, and we're going to have a focus group coming up with them. But one thing that's already being explored is for our HBCUs to start doing some intra-institutional sharing along the lines of the Awakened Life. But I mean, you know, just sharing what's going on in your life and how can we bring certain contemplative practices into, you know, how we're dealing with this trauma, with all the things that we're facing. Yeah. So that's already being explored. Another quick thing about the flattening the metrics is that, you know, you're right so much about these student org weeks, and it's the groups that have the most money that are so performance driven that they get more students for their metrics, for their money. But you know, one thing that we don't really have to create, but rather articulate and kind of give some framework to, is that whether they be students or us, we're all in a time of liminality. And it's kind of like, how do we get, you know, I mean, I think that is something to really be explored with our students and with ourselves. It's like, damn it, you know, where are we going? I mean, there is no beginning, middle, and end here. We're in a place of liminality, and I think it's very spiritually rich. It's scary as hell, but it's there. And so I don't really think that's not going to be anything theoretical or abstract. That's something that I think students can definitely, you know, hook into. So whatever that's worth.
Yeah, there's a meme going around Facebook and Twitter right now among United Methodists that's 2020 charge conference form, and it has one checkbox and it says, did you survive 2020? If so, skip everything else and go down to the bottom and sign it. You know, I think that's going to have to be the kind of grace that we offer ourselves, and I'm hoping that our conferences and structures will offer to everyone, not just campus ministries, but churches, to say, and are we yet alive, is going to have a lot of meaning for a lot of us at the end of this. You know, are we still here? And if we are, then we have succeeded in continuing to maintain the message of the gospel in this day and age. And that, to me, is the most important metric. Now, again, that's not what a lot of people are going to be measuring, but I think we as an organization, as the UMCMA, have the voice across the connection, which allows us to say these kinds of things. So that's going to be, as your advocacy chair for UMCMA, that's one of the things I'm going to commit us to advocating for, is a new look at metrics in this age. Yeah. So if you have thoughts about that, or things you think ought to be included in that conversation, just reply to the email that I sent to you with the link for this talk today, and I'd be glad to bring you on board with that. We don't have very much formal structure when it comes to making task forces and committees in UMCMA. If you want to be a part of it, we'll make you a part of it. Good. The other thing I would say, Chad's aware of this, but Charles, I want to make you aware of this. In Ohio, we have the United Methodist Chaplains group, which is not just people at United Methodist universities and colleges. It's anybody who's United Methodist who's a higher ed chaplain. So I'm going to add you to our list for that. But then I would encourage that to happen. I know there's been some talk here about Illinois Great Rivers and North Central jurisdiction and doing some things in those kinds of areas as well. I really think this is the time for us to be beefing up those connections as well, so that it's not just a once a summer thing for us. It becomes an ongoing conversation around how do we do our ministries together. So I'm encouraged by all the great movement that I'm seeing. I don't want to stifle the conversation, but if there's anything else that anybody wants to bring up, I want to give you opportunity to voice that, because we don't want to leave without having heard everything that everybody has to say.
Well, can I just offer a quick reflection on just this hour-long conversation? I've been sitting here realizing I had two meetings before this, one on COVID response for the university, and the other, one of the stranger parts of my job is that I advise one of our social fraternities on campus as well, which everybody thinks is bizarre, including me some days. And then what that group needs to be thinking about for returning to campus and COVID response and all the challenges there. And I don't know how other people's jobs are, but you know, our office is interfaith. So we serve all students regardless of religious affiliation, and sometimes that means we're trying to get them connected to other communities and things like that. But I find that there's often a push to be less Christian and not to be too Christian in language and things like that, which I agree with in the context that I'm in, but I signed up to be a Christian chaplain. So this conversation has been really helpful just to get context on what other people in my situation are dealing with. I particularly appreciated Megan's question because it's like, oh, right, like I'm not the only person dealing with this. And so I appreciate all of you being here and just giving me the opportunity to get that experience as we start looking towards fall and things restarting.
Well, Chad, if you ever want people to encourage you to be more Christian on your campus, just come to Northwest Ohio, because that is actually the what I get more often. But thank you for sharing that. I do appreciate that. And that's one of the things, that's why I'm a member of UMCMA. I'm not, well, I guess I am plugging because I'm a member of COCOM. But if you're not a part of UMCMA, one of the advantages, especially if you're a chaplain, is that you do get that opportunity. Because like those of us who are chaplains may be members of NACOOC, or now it's called Axel. And that's great for the interfaith work that we do. But I really appreciate talking with other United Methodist Christians about the work we do, and putting it within a specifically Christian theological framework is what has sustained me for the last 8 years. And so that's why I've been a member since day one. So yeah, I can't emphasize it enough. And when this is all over, we're going to be sending you all information, if you're not already, on how to become a member of UMCMA. It's a wonderful, wonderful organization. So.
And I'm sure you I hope you all are on our Facebook page, where we have a lot of information and people ask questions and we share, resources and all that kind of stuff. So if you are not on there, let us know and we can connect you. But glad to have you all join us today.
Yeah. Well, thank you all very much. And thank you, Mark, for being here, for representing GBHEM. GBHEM is one of our co-conspirators on this event, and so we're appreciative of that. Thank you, Megan, for being here to represent our COCOM. And thank you, all of you, for being here to join in the conversation. It's been enriching for me, and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you at some of our other events that we've got going on in the next 10 days or so.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll have the recordings of all the sessions available when the entire event is over. So you'll be able to go back and look at all those, but do take advantage of all the workshops and webinars coming up. So. All right, as we say at the chapel at ONU, go in peace and not in pieces. Bye-bye.